Hi everyone, we have some great questions here about writing project 2, and so I'm going to go through them as quickly as possible. If I skim through your question a little too fast, you send me a message and let me know if I need to clarify anything else or expound a little more on a certain aspect of this assignment. So the first question, first of all, thank you for catching this. This is simply a question on the word count. You know, how long does this need to be? Because I guess in a couple different places I had different requirements. So I will go with the lower. Okay, so the word length requirement, word count requirement is at least 1,200 words. It can go a little above that, but it needs to be at least 1,200 words. And to be honest, for this type of assignment, that's actually quite short because there's so much that we need to bring in and do here. All right, next questions. Now these questions kind of all group together under the category of topic, okay? How does this writing project 2 relate to writing project 1, and are we basically still doing the same thing, okay? First of all, we are working and building on writing the topic and the issue that we wrote about in writing project 1. So writing project 1, we picked one article where one author, spoke and wrote about their opinion concerning an issue, and then we responded to that author, okay? What we're going to be doing now is expound on that, which is actually really great practice and a type of exercise for critical thinking. Let's say that we liked that topic and we found it interesting, and it kind of, planted a germ of interest in our heads that's kind of been growing, and pretty soon we think, okay, I want to learn more about that issue. I want to say a lot more about that issue. And so that's how research develops and happens. And so what we are doing with writing project 2 is we are now going to take that issue or an aspect of it. It can develop, it can tweak a little bit. And I'll give you an example of how in a little bit. But we are then going to write a very formal academic paper kind of describing or introducing this issue and how it is manifest globally to our audience, and then also how it is manifest locally. Okay, so what we're doing is we are building on that issue and really kind of developing it out, expanding on it, building on it, and making it a lot more meaningful. And again, like I said, I'll give you an example here in a little bit. Let me move on though really quickly and talk about sources. There are a few questions on sources. And if you remember, we need 6 sources, okay, for this article. 1 or 2 can come from writing project 1. 2 need to come from peer-reviewed journal articles. And then we need a book and we need a local source. Okay, as far as the book, there's a question, does it need to be nonfiction? And yes, it does. Fiction does not work for research unless you're researching fiction writing. Because what we're doing is we are gathering sources where people and or authors, researchers, entities have expressed and argued their position on this issue, or provided research or data on the issue that we're focusing on. And as far as what peer review articles are, that's a really good question. And you're going to be touching on this a whole lot more in IFS, okay, in Carly's class. And so I don't want to touch too much on it here. But scholarly journals and peer-reviewed articles are how research is published, okay? So if you have a researcher who has been doing this research and writing this article, and usually these articles take years to write, and they finally get it ready to be published, they'll send it out to an editor, and the editor will then look at that article, and if they deem it, kind of interesting and worthy, basically, they will then send that article anonymously, they won't know who the author is, to 2 or 3 experts in the same field as the original author. So they are the author's peers, Okay, and then they're going to look at that article and they are just going to dissect it. And they're going to look at the research, the methods, the findings, how it has been written, if it's valid, if it's relevant, all of these different factors. And then they will deem whether it's worthy to be published or not. And it's really, really hard to get something published in a peer-reviewed published. And so those will go out in the form of scholarly journals, which are basically scholarly magazines. Here are some of them right here. And there's all different types of them. They're for every discipline, every subject you can think of. They're just different magazines full of scholarly peer-reviewed articles. There's no advertising or anything like that in here. It's all about the research. And so you know these articles are the most credible kind of sources and evidence you can use to back up an idea. And the way you can find out, kind of determine if oh, here, hold on, something is a peer-reviewed article is they look a little bit different. I mean, so here's a peer-reviewed article. You will have an abstract. Oh my goodness, I'm losing my words. They'll have a little abstract preview and they'll be quite long, using citations and in-text citations and sources. And then they will have their references or works cited at the very end. Okay, so that's one way that you can tell that this is a peer-reviewed journal article. And so I'll also share this little video, peer review in 3 minutes, that give you, probably explain peer-reviewed articles a little bit better than I do. Anyway, so moving forward, there's more questions under organization and purpose, and these are fantastic questions. First one, are we still not using I, first person I? And the answer is we are sticking with third person, okay? Simply because that is what is expected in this genre of formal academic research. The audience will expect that. That is what is valued as the type of formal writing expected. I'm being redundant here. The only time the I is used in formal research writing is when somebody has done primary research and they have to share with their audience what methods they used. Like, I used interviews. I did this extended ethnographic study, examining these people for an extended period of time. I did interviews. I did this and that. Okay, that's the only time that the I is really used. And since we're not doing primary research here, we're doing library research, we're not going to be using the I, because basically we need to practice. We need to practice sharing our opinions in third person, like we did in writing project 1. Okay. Now, another great question, how do we organize this? Do we organize it source by source? Or does the thesis need to reflect this? And I want to just kind of realign this and remind everyone that we're not going to be organizing this with the main focus on the sources. We are going to be organizing sources with our main focus on the thesis. Okay, keep that in mind. The whole purpose of an argumentative paper is to persuade the audience that our thesis is valid, that they should believe our thesis, that it's right. Okay, and so that's the main thing. Okay, in order to do that, we're going to share, a few points of that thesis, a few subclaims or reasons that thesis is valid, and that's where we're going to be bringing in the sources to support our opinions and our claims, so that our audience knows that it's not just us thinking this, that we just didn't, come up with the idea on our own, that other people agree with us. And so keep that in mind. So your sources are going to be organized how your thesis is organized. And I'll give you an example here in a minute. And it's the same thing. If we talk on the points discussed between authors, should these points be reflected in the thesis? Yes, everything's going to be organized by that thesis, and our paragraphs are going to be organized as far as the points made within that thesis. And anytime we change subject, we change, a paragraph, and all of those kind of things. So last question right here is, this is kind of back to sources, kind of, touches on both of them. And I love this question because I feel like it's asked with a little bit of attitude, which I absolutely love. Because it's kind of like, okay, just to be clear, basically, I think this person is saying, just to be clear, are we doing just the same thing that we did in part one? Okay, or writing project one. Okay, it asks if, one thing I do want to touch on, it does ask, are we using two sources along with the article? No, we are only bringing forward two at the most, okay, not two along with the original article. You can bring two articles from Writing Project One forward at the most, one or two. But the question as far as are we writing about the same thing is no, but kind of yes. We are building on what we started in Writing Project One. We are expounding upon it, and just the fact that you are required to address or point out that this is also an issue that is manifest or acted out in local contexts, that suggests that you need to develop it further also, okay? Let me give you an example here. So let's say that you picked this article for Writing Project One. Drones are here to stay, get used to it. I think this was written by Fitzpatrick, if I remember right. And your job in Writing Project One was to analyze this article and respond to what the author said, respond to what Fitzpatrick said about drones. And as you read that, you kind of really found especially interesting his discussion on privacy issues, okay? And so you bring in another article that talks about privacy and drones, and you think that's really interesting, and you use that for Writing Project One. Well, now you want to continue that idea of privacy, and you're going to take these two articles and you're going to carry them forward in for Writing Project Two. And let's see, and they'll be part of the synthesis. Let's see, you're going to use them for part of the synthesis. And you bring in a third article, so because three are required for that synthesis. And you're going to bring these authors into conversation with one another on the issue of privacy. So you're not going to be talking about drones anymore so much, but that you will use that as an example of how there are privacy issues, and you will bring them into conversation with one another. Then after the synthesis, you will bring in an article on digital privacy. If I can think, digital privacy in Arizona. This is published by the ACLU in Arizona. And that will be used to kind of anchor this issue as taking place in a local context. And then as you move forward, you find a book that discusses, you know, there's a chapter on privacy and information technology that has some good ideas and some good points in there that you want to use. And then you find another article that talks about technology threats to privacy. And you note here that all three of these other, sources don't all have to talk about the issue in Arizona. But once you anchor it in Arizona, you can use these others to apply the issue in Arizona and use them that way. And then let's say after you've read all of these articles and you've gotten to know what they say and you have your own opinion forming in your head, you can come up with your thesis that encompasses everything that you want to do in this article. And so here's an example, okay? Questions surrounding the effect of technology on personal privacy rights have been a matter of debate for some time. While experts debate on the different concerns on a global scale, so do you see how that has already prepared your audience for the synthesis on a global scale going on? Threats to privacy affect all communities and individuals, even here in Arizona. It leads to increases of fraud, political manipulation, and misaccusation. Okay, my brain is not working, and I don't even think misaccusation is a word, but it's all I can come up with right now, so bear with me. Okay, so there's a thesis. There's your thesis that encompasses everything. It prepares your audience for the synthesis of a global discussion coming up, and it gives them 3 points or subclaims that will support your thesis. Fraud, then you'll talk a little bit about fraud, and you will bring in some evidence from, your articles. You'll talk about manipulation then, and bring in some evidence, and then you will talk about accusation, okay? And all of these three things should rise from what you have found in your articles. There you go. So let me know if you have any more questions, okay? Or if you want me to explain anything else.